This is a GK Media podcast.
This podcast is part of the GK Media Studios Creators Network, helping people tell their stories. Become a storyteller today and learn about our podcaster network at gkmediastudios.com.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode, joined as always by the legend himself, Niall Leyden. And today, Niall, I want to turn the table on you and I want to focus on wealth management to a degree, but it's always something that has fascinated me, and it's a question that peers that I'd be in different business groups would talk about every so often, where they're building up a pool of money. What do they do with it? And I know there's one thing that you don't agree with, which is what I always thought was the right way to go. But firstly, is there I think before you said there's 5 kind of ways, things you can do with your money.
The $1 million question. The $1 million question.
So I want the $1 million answer.
Yeah, and blame me if it all goes wrong. That's great. I think that concludes this episode. Brilliant, Garry. Thanks for that. Look, and I think, again, going back to what we talked about in episode 1, beginning with the end in mind, the big piece in all of this is, and I go back to the clients, we work with all over the country over the last number of years and decades, is the first conversation I would always have with people is, what's the money for?
Yeah, because you spoke to me before about what would you like at the end of the day, whether when it comes to retirement, whatever. And I was saying, my dream since I was a child was always to have a little home by the sea. Now, ironically, I live in the west of Ireland, but I was thinking of sunshine.
That's okay, yeah. And we've had a sunny couple of weeks.
The sun shining down on the house by the sea, not, bucket and rain.
And a little glass of Riacha, no doubt.
Exactly. So I've always loved the idea of having a place near the sea in a country like Spain or Portugal or Italy or something like that.
Well, I would certainly always say dreaming someday it'll be the right one.
Yeah.
And let's make that dream become a reality. So that would be our starting point, and it is my starting point with all the clients and
because
businesses.
Everyone has a different kind of dream. So it's like finding out what is it that they actually want in the end.
Yeah. In the end. Yeah. And to that point, and we will talk about, I suppose the 5 boxes or the 5 homes that you can put your money in, because there's a lot of misconceptions and mistruths around volatility and risk and what works and what doesn't. And I'll certainly share.
And this isn't even just if you have a pool of money in business. I mean, you could have inherited money, or you could have won a lot, or money. I'm just talking for people where money is available. Yeah. And you don't know what to do, and it's sitting in an account. It's not really earning interest.
Yeah.
What can one do with it? What are the options that are
okay? Yeah, it's a brilliant question. So, we talk about the 3 Ps, the purpose, the plan, and the portfolio. And very often people come, they flip the script and they come at the portfolio approach saying, we have a sum of whether it's 100,000 or 500,000 or a million or 100 million. The figure is largely irrelevant.
Well, if they have 100 million, you tell them to come to me.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll produce videos for you for infinity.
Yeah, infinity and beyond. But on that piece, Garry, this is really, really important. So if clients do come, which they do, with a sum of money from a sale of a property or an inheritance or a business exit or a lotto win or whatever it might look like, it needs to be in service to a plan. And a plan needs then to be in service to the bigger why. So we need to fully understand emotionally and financially what the money is for. And there are only 5 places, broadly speaking, where you can invest your money. So the first one is cash. So cash is, depositing your money, well, in days gone by, under the mattress.
But or in a shoebox.
Or a biscuit tin. I think back to my grandfather there. We came from a farming background, but there was a little biscuit tin and there was, pounds, shilling and pence. So cash, Garry, is where you're depositing money in a bank.
Yeah. But it doesn't grow though, really, does it?
No, it's liquid, it's available, it's fine, but you're typically getting 1 or 2%. And inflation is the silent killer. Inflation is something that people really, really need to be very careful of. It can be your best friend or your worst nightmare. Your best friend insofar as if you have assets like property where you have rent, maybe linked broadly speaking to inflation. If you have equities or shares in businesses with dividends and profitability increasing, that can be good. But if you're, let's say, for example, in a job with a fixed wage, so inflation, broadly speaking, is in around 2 or 3%. So the definition of money is really purchasing power.
Yeah.
If you look at a Big Mac, you don't eat Big Macs anymore, do you?
No.
So I think in 2000, there were a Big Mac might have been €2 or £2, and it's now closer to a fiver. So inflation will erode the value of money over time. So if you have money in a bank earning 1% and inflation is doing 2 or 3%, well, you're going to have the value of your money over 10, 15, 20 years. So that's box number one.
And we all know about inflation at the moment, because there's a great restaurant near where you live that you caught me outside before going in to get a takeaway from. And we came across them during COVID, and we have all their early brochures of how much it was to get food from this restaurant up to, we'll say, 4 or 5 years later now. And it's nearly doubled the price of a meal from what it was 4 or 5 years ago to what it is today. And it's true, like if you have money sitting in the bank, if it's 10 grand even, in 5 years, it's kind of probably worth 9 grand or something,
It's an illusion, on 5 years in permanent TSB and 20 plus years in Ulster Bank. I've seen firsthand, people take comfort and confidence a little bit
of course,
around having the money deposited. But so that's option number one. Option number two then is fixed income, where you're lending money to, companies or governments, what you call bonds.
Okay.
Bonds. So broadly speaking, bonds, and they play a really, really strong and important role in helping diversify portfolios. But you're essentially a loaner, not an owner. So you're lending money to a business, to a government, and the returns on bonds, broadly speaking, again, over the last 10, 20, maybe 100, 200 years, has been in the order of in around maybe 3, maybe 4% at the very upper end.
Because it was a thing before where people, as a 21st birthday present, was given like a €25 bond or something like that.
With the post office, the prize bonds and all of that. Yeah.
But you don't really get
the return. No, you don't. And I mean, this is something that I'm really passionate about, the definition of risk and volatility. I mean, it's a misdemeanor, and thankfully in Ireland, with so many certified financial planners, we really do need to take time to educate people around, that investment is a long game. We talk a lot about I do certainly about the hare and the tortoise. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the third piece then, the third option then is equities. Now, I have to confess, for a long time, and we need to talk in our clients' language, I incorrectly assumed that clients knew what I was talking about when I was talking about equities. And that actually happened. Until maybe some clients...
No, you probably need to elaborate on them for me as well.
Yeah, well, so like equities are, I mean, Coca-Cola, Pfizer, LinkedIn, Facebook. You look at Warren Buffett, 94 or 5 years of age, stepping down this year. He's been 8 decades in investing, owns Berkshire Hathaway, leads a very modest lifestyle, likes a can of Coke, lives in a semi-detached house. I listened to all of his material.
And in fairness, he's given away a lot of his wealth.
He has. He's a really, an extraordinary...
So it's not that he's a miser or
No,
like
far from it. And his partner, Charlie Munger, who passed there last year. But so equities are a share in innovation and growth. So
it's buying shares in companies.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And whether it's €1,000, whether it's €100 a month children's allowance, or it's €1,000 or 100,000, you can access that. There are lots of platforms and lots of ways where we can allow clients participate in innovation. Now, I'm very long and very optimistic about the world becoming a much better place. Poverty is half what it was 50 years ago. People are living longer. Life expectancy has gone from 40 to well over 80. You look at smartphones, you look at artificial intelligence, you look at healthcare, you look at pharmaceutical. The world, broadly speaking, the media is certainly not our friend. Yes, we talk about Trump, we hear about Trump and tariffs, and that's not to diminish at a very humanitarian level all of the atrocities that are going on in the world. But from a financial planning, wealth management perspective, what's really important is begin with the end in mind. This is more often than not a 10, 20, 30, 40-year plan.
Yeah.
So
again, like people were panicking recently when Trump had Liberation Day and he was announcing different tariffs and so on. And every morning you'd wake up, or in the afternoons, the NASDAQ had dropped. Wall Street was on the fear. It was like doom and gloom, panic. And I turned to you one of the days in the gym and I said, what's your reaction to everything going on? And you're like, there's no panic like.
Yeah, there isn't.
And then everything started kind of creeping up again.
Yeah.
And improving again. But it's for people if you're thinking long term, you don't panic in the short term.
It's so true. So I would have worked with Connie in Ulster Bank for 20 years, and she joined the team there this year. And I would have remarked in the middle of all of the I won't say the meltdown, but all of the media and Trump and tariffs,
the fear-mongering,
the fear-mongering. And the same week I was doing a presentation, there was a lot of business owners there, and we were just I was explaining our philosophy around, playing the long game. The best holding time period is forever, and that this too shall pass. If you go back through the last 200 years with World Wars, Cold Wars, 9/11s, 1987, 2008, COVID. But Connie made a very poignant comment to me 6, 8, maybe 10 weeks ago when it was all getting a little bit hot with the markets and different things. She says, Niall, we've only got one phone call from all of our clients around the country. And I says, Connie, what does that tell you? I think, we're not ones for praising ourselves, but we're in regular contact with all of our clients.
Yeah.
They know the game, they know the score, they know that it's long term. So number 3 is equities. And if you're serious about wealth creation, you really do need to ensure that your money is allocated, or a portion of your money is allocated to equities, which for simplicity is the good and great and wonderful companies of the world in a diversified portfolio. And we'd have a whole separate conversation to ensure that you have a short, medium and long-term goal.
But I think people can go back and look at, the shares for Facebook and Apple, maybe even Tesla and so on 10 years ago, and the growth that they have had over the last decade to clearly see, wow, like if I invested X amount in 2015 in Apple, actually, what would it be worth today? And it is that kind of, missed that one.
Yeah, and you're so right, because it's time in the market as opposed to timing, because, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result. So the best clients that I've worked with are the people that just invest and forget. This is in service to a much higher purpose, a retirement, children's education, getting kids on property ladders, a business exit. But the equities traditionally, over the last 10, 20, 50, 100 years have delivered twice, sometimes 3 times what government bonds will deliver.
Yeah.
And as opposed to cash and, and inflation-proofing the purchasing power of your money, equities, I won't say they're only show in town because there is volatility. And I always say, there's a 75, 25, 15 rule that we share with our clients and if you're not comfortable with this, equities are not for you. So
yeah.
What that, Garry, is markets will rise, broadly speaking, 75% of the time. They'll drop 25% of the time. And in any 12-month period, you need to expect, because it will happen, a plus or minus 15% swing in the value of your investments. And if you're at peace with that, and it sits okay with you, and you're in for a 5 or 10 year time horizon, more often than not, you'll be okay.
But what about what we love here in Ireland? Property. I mean, like you can see it's having huge issues now across Europe because the whole Airbnb thing is blown up and locals are getting, so we're going to Ibiza shortly. And when we were in Ibiza last year, we were talking to locals there and they were saying, we can't get doctors, can't get nurses, can't get police here on the island because they can't afford to live on the island because the rent is so high, because people from outside of the island have come in, bought property and are renting it out, and they just can't afford the price of the rent. But it's a huge thing. Like it was a thing before in Ireland, how many houses do you own? And again, you can see as the economy has improved after the crash following the Celtic Tiger, that people are doing that thing now where they have their home, but they're also buying an apartment to rent out or a second house to rent out. And again, it's making it very unfair and difficult for people who just want to get on the property ladder or just people looking for accommodation alone. Yeah. And the rent is just excessive. It's really made life difficult for people in their 20s and 30s now in this country. But it's this huge hunger for property. Is there huge kickback? Is there huge money to be made in property?
That's. I mean, for me, property, and I'm speaking from personal experience here as well. I mean, our family business there was a lot of property, and I would have invested in property, but it has a place in a portfolio. And Irish people, I mean, have this affinity, have this love affair with property.
Yeah.
And you need to look at, I suppose, they're the biggest mistake and the thing we've all learned, and there's scars. There's still a lot of people carrying a lot of luggage, and whilst the economy is going well, there's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain out there in terms of, it wasn't that long ago where if you think of 2008 and we're still living with the aftermath of all of that, with negative equity, people lost their homes, lost their cars, lost their jobs. A lot of people lost their lives. And I say that most empathetically and with a big heart. So take this in the spirit as intended. I mean, property certainly. I mean, it's an excellent asset class, but again going back to financial planning and wealth management, in terms of free lunch, diversification, having your eggs in lots of various different baskets. We'd have a lot of clients coming to us saying, is now a good time to buy property? And then when they go and talk to, we've partnered with some of Ireland's best accountants and tax consultants. And when you look then at the whole tax treatment, the tax on the rent, the PRTB, when you sell, you've CGT. So it needs to make sense. And again,
because what you're getting in rent, let's say you have a house and you're getting $2,000 a month in rent.
Yeah.
What you actually get into your pocket,
divide it by 2 nearly. I mean, you can offset a certain amount of expenses. So,
but you lose quite a good chunk in tax. And then, as you say, if you eventually sell the property, you're losing a good chunk again because it's not your primary residence.
Yeah. And it goes back to our why, Gary. I mean, it goes back to, again, from personal experience. I think the reason I'm so passionate about all of this is that I've seen the mistakes and I've made some of the mistakes. And for all of the people that we have the pleasure of working with, it's about just ensuring that they have their eggs in different baskets. So you have your cash, you have your fixed income, which is bonds, you have 3 of equity, 4 is property, and then 5, there's another asset class where they talk a lot about commodities and cryptocurrencies and private equity and so forth.
We'll get into that in a second, but I want to just roll back to property because for me, the price of houses, property in general, is really excessive at the moment. The price of our house in 15 years has doubled. Okay. And people say, oh, that's great. The price of my property is now doubled. But for me, it's nowhere near realistic. And I can't see the price of our property double again in another 15 years. And I always feel that when we're in the good times, people think that it's just going to keep going up and up and up and up and up. And they don't zoom out and realize that economies go up and down all the time. And I've had multiple conversations with people saying, no, property won't drop. There's a demand for it. But you just need something to happen. You need a tariff to come in on pharmaceuticals, suddenly change things in Ireland. Things can happen, but I just think
it's an emotive subject, Gary. And I think what we've both learned and what lots of people learn, you have to keep the emotion out of it and try and think logically about this. Because when you mix leverage with property, I mean, it can be a ticking time bomb. If you're talking from an investment perspective, because there's only one bed you can sleep on. You've never seen a trailer and a hearse. And I'm all for property, but you need to know what you're doing. And, when you mix debt in there and all of a sudden, market's correct and you might have people there at loan to values in excess of 60 or 70%. It becomes a good bit more sensitive. So property, certainly, it works. We talked about inflation being your best friend or your worst nightmare. If you have property and you're getting rental income and it's inflation proofed. But with so much, that supply demand imbalance in Ireland, we hear Dave McWilliams and other very esteemed economists talking a lot more about property than I. But I think simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, and that's what we try and do with the people we're working with is try and compartmentalize and say, what makes sense.
Yeah.
Go back to what's your purpose, what's your goal, what does good look like. Don't follow the trend.
Yeah,
we have this tendency to, not that we're like sheep, but we're overconfident in our own ability. We trade too much. We buy high, we sell low, and we follow trends.
We become experts, or we think we're experts, but
we're not.
And talk to me then about cryptocurrency, because people have made a lot of money.
They have. I mean, it's not something that we specialize in. I mean, going back to just trying to keep it as best we can simple, and ensure under the 3 umbrellas. Number 1, protect and preserve and mind what you've worked hard to accumulate. So like me, you're married, you have 2 children, you have a business, so it's very much peer-to-peer. So the big and most important piece in your life is, the what ifs, the ifs, the buts, the whens. We plan and God smiles. I've seen that firsthand. So you need to ensure that you have peace of mind that if something happens, if you die or you get seriously ill or you can't work, that you're protecting your wife, your kids, your family, and your business, your employees. The second piece then, Gary, is, that whole retirement plan. I'm 50 next year. I need to ensure that, for me and for my clients or for you, for everybody, that you're quite clear about what it is you're looking for, what good looks like, and what you need to do to get there. And I'm having, at the moment, quite uncomfortable conversations with a lot of people because there has been changes in legislation, which we'll talk about it's a whole new minefield. But retirement planning is something near and dear to everyone's heart, because when you have the kids reared and the mortgage paid off and different things, every day is a Saturday and a Sunday.
Yeah.
So to do that very tax efficiently, and then the savings and the investments is the third piece. But we in our business focus very much on getting brilliant at the basics, just covering all bases, and having a nice spread across all the various different asset classes. For cryptocurrency, for a very small portion of a client's overall net worth, yeah, certainly, but it's a lot higher risk and risk tolerance and capacity. It's not for everybody.
Yeah,
but it has worked, and we know lots of people that have done very, very well, and good luck to them.
Yeah.
Long may it continue.
Excellent. So the 5 places people can lodge their money in: a bank, in a deposit account. The second one was
fixed income bonds.
So buying bonds,
Yeah.
Third one was the
good and great one.
I was listening. It's like meeting Jory here from Finding Nemo.
I saw a can of Coke out there in the studio, so just think Coca-Cola.
Third one was shares in business that are doing well. Fourth one, I remember, property.
Yeah.
And then fifth one is like your
commodities, cryptocurrencies, private equity.
And gold and stuff. Would that be a commodity? Yeah. Okay, excellent.
So there you have it. In actual fact,
which is better, do you think, silver or gold to invest in?
I wouldn't have an opinion on which commodity. Again,
are they always generally going up, or?
Well, a lot of them are negatively correlated. So again, the portfolios we're constructing for our clients would have thousands of companies with massive spread across, geographical spread, across pharmaceutical, healthcare, all the various different sectors, industries. So, I mean, diversification is so important.
Okay.
And again, we'll certainly have a much more robust, in-depth conversation around, comparing and contrasting. If you look at a portfolio that's 100% in companies, that's traditionally done 8 to 10% per annum over the last 20 years, 100 years. If you look at a 60-40 portfolio, which there's a lot of talk about at the moment, that's done really, it's done very well. A lot less volatility, delivering maybe 6 or 7% per annum.
So don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Just spread it out. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
But make sure you're partnering with somebody that knows what they're at. If we're driving the car, resist the temptation to grab the steering wheel. The media is not your friend. Eyes on the prize. It's time, not timing.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Appreciate that.
There you go.
So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and hopefully it gave you some knowledge and a kind of food for thought, really, in terms of if you are building up a little cash cow for yourself, or indeed if money comes your way, or just be thinking about what it is you want for yourself down the road. Just something to think about. So thanks for listening to this week's episode with Niall and myself. As always, we welcome feedback and comments from you. So please do get in touch if there's anything you want to share with us. And we ask in return that you share this episode with people who you find will benefit from listening to it as well. Thanks again. We'll chat to you next Friday.